magic myself. So I was experimenting with using different systems, religious ideas, and different rituals to see kind of what worked and what doesn't. You know, like I'd have a ritual mostly inspired by Judaism, or one inspired by Hinduism, or one inspired by Buddhism, and see, you know, what produces what kind of result. When I started working with Thelema, half just because, well, I was working with the Enochian angels, and I couldn't get them to talk to me. They weren't interested in me at all, or what I had to say. But I predicated one of these Enochian invocations of an angel of the watchtowers with Liber Reguli, Liber 5, Crowley's thing there, which I had kind of like wrote off as like, I didn't like the idea that you kind of praying at his house. I felt like it was some kind of weird psychic vampirism or whatever. So, but I tried it, and then I did the ritual right away, and the angel was actually interested to talk to me. He flashed a big Star of Babylon at me with like a question mark. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go with that. And then more and more as I started engaging with the Thelema and using the rituals in my own ceremonial magic, and I became more and more invested, I started to see that, you know, I was wrong, Crowley was right, the things that were pissing me off were just things, and I changed my thinking a great deal during that period. And I don't think that anyone should just take Crowley on his word. I don't think he wants people to have blind faith in him. I think he wanted people to seriously engage his work and look behind what he was trying to say. And that's a lot of work, because he did write quite a lot. And sometimes it is hard to process it all in overall context, but you really have to kind of throw yourself in there. And the Book of the Law is the first step to really kind of getting where Crowley's going. But as I said at the beginning, it's important to emphasize the connection between this book and the production of this book and Crowley's history in the Golden Dawn and Crowley's involvement with Enochian magic. Because these two things, the Golden Dawn symbolism is sort of rife throughout the book, and that it's very important to understand those rituals and that idea, that magical system that produced this work. The concept of the production of this, of course, brings us back, and actually, as Crowley points out several times, the changing of the aeons is actually mimicked by a Golden Dawn initiation ritual, which I don't know a whole lot about, but he saw that as what's the word I want? A precursor or a preliminary stage of revealing this book and allowing him to understand it, and gave him kind of the language to understand it. So that's a system that people are going to have to look at the context of Liberal as well. Crowley writes about the antecedents of Thelema, what he sees as ideas that came before it, and he really emphasizes Nietzsche, for example, as one of the major sources of that, and I think it's important for people to read these kind of philosophical texts. Crowley makes references to different ones constantly. He was really into Hegel. I think that you see a lot of his ideas echoed. I personally see some Spinoza's ideas echoed in there. And Crowley, it's important to understand that Crowley was very well read, he was very well educated, and it's sort of key to doing this to have that kind of educational background and educational grounding. I'm not personally wild like the morality and the doctrines of ethics that you'll see on any liberal arts university are not going to jive with Thelema at all, and in fact they're going to be very hostile to it. But I think going through that kind of education is very important, because it gives you the kind of background. And you know, everyone can read stuff on their own, and I really respect people who take the time and energy to teach themselves, but if no one's forcing you to write essays and your work isn't being held to a standard where someone who isn't, you know, educated on the subject more so than you can look it over and say, you know, this is correct, this is incorrect, you know, you're missing something here, because there's a lot of context to these books, and they're not easy to get on their own. And it's not that people aren't intelligent enough to get them. It's that, you know, you need to have the background and these ideas. And although we do live in a time where it's very easy to get lectures on philosophy online and lectures on religion online, and you know, from actual good universities, and there's some great stuff on there. So I definitely would encourage people, if they feel like that's a bit easier format for them to work with, to look at those and write them out. And if someone has a question, to write. I know many university professors that love to get random emails from people asking questions about academic subjects that they're invested in. And people love to talk about the things that they're interested in, and it's not really hard to get them to open up on that regard. So I just want people to start thinking about the resources that they can apply to this situation. You know, whether or not they actually want to go to the school, which, although I would say it is good to get a degree and be accredited in the background that one has But what people really have to do is take initiative, I think. And that's sort of in a way the role of Thelema fundamentally to be what I like to call the source of causal initiative, to make the world around you react to you. Don't be reacting to the world around you. It's the difference between being an active person and being a passive person, essentially. If you're just reacting to everything that happens, then that's not a self-determined sense of someone who's really acting on the true will. That's more a sense of someone who kind of doesn't seem to know what to do. Like, that's a great part about true will. The closer you get to it, the more clear the next step is, because you know what direction you're going in. And that means that there's very little, you're never bored, let me put it like that. There's always something to do. You may experience bouts of angst or annoyance, but you definitely have like shit on your plate at all times, which I think is important for people. There's nothing more destructive in the world than boredom. There's nothing that will take a person apart faster and make them do stupid things than just having them be bored, which brings us back to the problem of a society with no higher goals. People are bored as hell out there. You can really see it. And they're just trying to escape it, and it's really because they don't have that kind of thing in their life. Now, I don't think Thelema is necessarily going to be here to create those kind of changes or to fix that problem, but I think it will provide a way out for the people who are capable of fixing that problem for themselves. The Book of the Law is very clear. Ye are against the people, O my chosen. Like, this is the overall society is never going to really jive with this. I don't think you'll ever see Thelema take root, or if you do, it will take root in a kind of corrupt form. And Liber 418 clearly talks about the four great devils that are essentially the perversions of the four great religions. And to him, those are the devils are the gods that men worship, or people worship, because they don't understand what these religious ideas kind of are trying to say, or they're told by someone else. They deal with it through an interlocutor, and I think that it's completely possible for Thelema to arise like that. I like to think about what is the great devil of Thelema, and it's kind of clearly identified as someone who invests in this stuff but is magically decapitated. If they don't have the magical force behind it, then it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, and they're not going to have the kind of lives and effect that they are intending to have. It's very easy to, and Crowley goes to great pains to try to make the distinction. Do what thou wilt doesn't mean do what you want, and people, this actually is pretty much what I was saying about the sexual freedom thing. You can't just say, okay, I'm now a Thelemite, and I believe do what thou wilt, so this is my will, and this is how I'm going to do it. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of self-discovery. And if you do it right, you will not be the same person that you started off with at all. You may not even recognize yourself from that time. It's definitely true in my case. And finding out that will, identifying that form of desire, is the whole point. It's easy to want a fast answer, basically, and that's the problem if you're making an investment of identity. Well, this is especially what the problem with the beginner books are. People get into them, they make an investment of identity in Thelema. Then they start seeing things that contradict with what they had, and they take these contradictions personally. They hurt them personally because they have now put their identity into this idea. So they're taking it personally. And it makes them defensive. It makes them hostile to what they're reading later on. And it makes them more likely to leave or to get into something else, I think, because that's what happens when we make our big investment of identity. Like, we live in an apparently secular culture, but people still take things very personally. I mean, admittedly, most people right now, probably in this city, would get more upset if you made fun of their favorite band than if you made fun of their religion. I think that's indisputable. And people don't realize, they think that they're free of these kind of attachments and these kind of like weird little personal investments. They just come to be invested in other things, and often things that are far more shallow than the philosophical or religious ideas that they hold in contempt as being destructive or harmful.